Welcome to the Final Frontiers radio show, where we spotlight inspiring missionary endeavors around the globe. Stay tuned to hear how you can personally get involved, helping the Lord's frontline soldiers effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. Today we're going to talk about the work of a national preacher in the country previously called Burma. We're going to interview a missionary working with the Touch of Life program in Honduras. And we're going to discuss the new audio evangelistic tool called the PowerPack Nano. Hello, this is Joshua Martin, and today I'm here with John Nelms. We're going to be talking about a preacher that is in the country of Myanmar. That's just north of Thailand. That's in Southeast Asia territory. This man's name is Vel Siama. Now, John, you've known him for quite some time. Can you remember back when you first met him, that story?
Well, I had gone to visit a work in the Philippines, and among the other things they had was a Bible college. And after I spoke to the students that morning, several of them, of course, would, as they do, they come up to talk to you. And one of them introduced himself to me as being from what we called Burma at that time, now Myanmar. I thought that was interesting to have a Burmese guy in the school in the Philippines studying the Bible. And several years later, he wrote me and asked, he told me that he had finished his education but didn't name the school, so I didn't put two and two together. He wanted to know if we'd support him. And I wrote him back and told him, we'd love to, but, we have a policy that we don't support anyone who has not yet started a church. Now our policy is they have to have already started at least two churches to even be considered. And he had not yet started a church. He'd gone back to his home church. So I told him, we can't, but down the road, maybe once you meet our qualifications, you can. And it was probably 10 or 15 years later that he wrote and said, we met before and you told me to let you know I have started X number of churches. And so we began supporting him after checking him out. But I didn't remember this story till you and I were there last year.
Right. We sat there and we had a meal together, and I can remember him telling all kinds of stories from just the past few years, and some of them just made me tear up just listening to him. It was some very emotional stuff, and he is a sincere guy. He's amazing. He's got 10 preachers out there that right now we are supporting through Final Frontiers, and he also has an orphanage, and we got to go visit that orphanage, but I know you got to preach there that Sunday. We had a service right there in his facility, and I remember 4 people accepted Christ.
Yeah, and I had to be honest, show my lack of faith. That really surprised me because I expected everybody there was a believer.
I did too.
and I thought, well, I'm going to do what you're supposed to do. And I think I turned the invitation over to him, and I was really surprised. But there was one little girl there that touched my heart because I was trying to explain how God adopts us into his family, that we're really the children of Satan, but that even though we're the children of his enemy, he loves us enough that he would adopt us into his own family. And so there were all these kids sitting on the floor where I was preaching. And I looked at Vel. I said, are any of these children an orphan? And he said, brother, they all are. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't know if it was apparent or not, but I felt like I was stunned there for like 15 minutes. They're all orphans? So I asked one little girl to come up and help me with that illustration, and she just touched my heart. Before we left that day, my wife, Nolene, and I decided we'd sponsor her, and we are. And she, in fact, I think you took a video of her with us, and we put it on the internet, and other people decided they wanted to help some kids in that orphanage too. But she's so precious.
Yes, there's 19 of them there that we're supporting now, and there's 9 more that are not sponsored, and they've been through a lot. The last time that I was there, I got to go back and visit and see them. It's a heartbreak to see some of that and to hear some of their stories. We also got to go out and visit some of the preachers around there, and that was a lot of fun. That was real. We got to not just go out and visit homes of believers, but I was able to go with Vel and with a couple of his preachers, and we went to some Buddhist families, and we went in and they invited us in, and we're seeing all of his little relics that he was so proud of there. I mean, he said, yeah, come in and see it, and so we're looking at all that. We go into another house, and we got to see this lady. They were witnessing to this lady, and then the mother came out, and so it was neat to witness with them.
They've got a good ministry. I notice that a lot of times their churches meet upstairs in the pastor's house. Mm-hmm. They'll live downstairs, but they turn the entire upstairs into just like one big room. I know you spoke to, I think they were college students.
Oh, I remember that.
But they seemed so zealous, and I noticed that as you would go from reference to reference, they're sitting cross-legged on the floor. They'd open their Bibles and they flip the pages to be able to follow along with what you were saying. I just seemed to have such a zeal about wanting to know God's Word so they could give it out to others.
Burma has a different feel to it. Well, what's called Myanmar now, a different feel. When you cross over from Thailand to Myanmar, it's very different. Even the people, the one striking difference is most of the women and even some of the men will wear this yellow paint on their cheeks and on their forehead. And they do that for sunscreen, but also because it's kind of a beauty mark. But you go around the country and you just see a lot of differences.
After Buddha died, hundreds of years later, his disciples started spreading out as missionaries. They really didn't go west much towards Iraq or Israel. They went east. And, of course, the first place was Bangladesh and then Burma. Before they ever got to Thailand, Vietnam, Japan, China, they were in Burma. So to me, it's a more strict Buddhism than what you would have in Thailand. But they're very, very devoted to Buddhism there. So it makes evangelism there more difficult. But because the efforts of men like Adoniram Judson, who started presenting the gospel seeds there over 200 years ago, evangelism is more ripe in Burma than it would be next door in Thailand or in Laos or another place like that.
And when you go there, you can actually see what he saw. I mean, back in the 1800s, when Adoniram Judson was there, the lake where he baptized, I got to go down and see that. I got to see the Shwedagon Pagoda. We went up and we traveled through that. That's a place where I've gone to several different times, and you still see everyone up there in the festivals. Even if it's not a festival, they're all bowing. Very, very strong Buddhism. I got the chance to witness to a taxi driver the second time that I was there, and this man, I mean, we were talking, I was speaking about Buddhism to him. I showed him that I respected his way of thinking and then was able to just start interjecting the gospel, and he said, I've never heard it that way. He said, I've never thought about it that way. And so it's a very spiritually dark area. But we've been able to see the Shwedagon Pagoda up there, that golden bell that's been there all this time. And you know Adoniram Judson came out his door and saw that every day.
Yeah, every day.
He talks about it.
Well, in his biography, he writes about how he arrived in Burma at the ports at night. Of course, there was no street lights at that time. And so the next morning, he looked up, and at the end of the street, he could see the spire of the pagoda with the morning sun glistening off of it. And you can stand at the very place he stood and look down the panorama of the city there and see this very same thing that this great missionary saw over 200 years ago. And it's thought-provoking, but you realize why he went there was to turn these people from darkness to light. And here this taxi driver saying he'd never heard that or never heard it that way. And that's why we want to send missionaries there. But Burma's pretty much a closed country, or at least highly, highly restricted. But you know what? There's national preachers all over Burma. And so since we can't send people who look like us there, why not support those who are already there, the natural-born Burmese who've come to Christ and can minister to their own people in their own language, in their own ways. That's what we've been doing in Burma for, well, about 29 years now, mostly in the north. But we want to see Burma saturated with the gospel.
The main state that is saturated is Chin State. That's further up in the north and a little bit on the western side there. Chin State, there are so many Christians. And Vel Siama, he came from that area, and he told me, he said, there's still villages on the west bordering India right there where he said, I want to go back and I want to start a church. We were talking about that. What would it be like to travel to a jungle village, spend some time there, and just really preach the gospel, see a church started? The last time I was there, Vel was clear over up in the northeast area, going to some conferences, trying to help some of his preachers. Oh boy, I wish I could, I wanted to go help him, but he's on fire. There's stuff he wants to do, and he needs funding. This is a man who, if he could just have some more funding, we've been talking about it today, he could just light off and explode and do all kinds of neat things.
Burma has been closed since World War II, and there's been a civil war going on there since World War II. The majority of the converts Adoniram Judson had were actually tribal people from the Karen tribe. And they're mostly Baptists, although today most of them, they think they're going to heaven because they're Baptists. They have no idea about salvation, repentance, grace through faith, and so forth. They were just, quote, raised Baptists. But you'll find a lot of Baptist pastors that aren't even born again. So somebody needs to get them the truth and explanations about doctrine and so forth. We're going to have to work through the national preachers, and thank God for men like Vel who are already training Timothy's, but can train many, many, many more if he has the resources to do it with.
So if you'd like to help this man, or if you would like to support a child over there, there's still 9 children that are not supported there, that are not sponsored. If you'd like to help him, you can go to finalfrontiers.world and contact us about this. You know, they just received technically their independence. It's been under military control. So 2016 really was when they have just had some democracy. This is fresh for them. The whole country is.
And they're excited.
It's opening up. It's opening up right now. So, yes.
I hope some of you will be interested and help out. And by the way, just in case the Lord should lead, in his orphanage, he tries to teach the children English, which will help them get a better job in life. So if you're retired or over the hill, so to speak, as I am, perhaps you might want to go and spend a year or the rest of your life, for that matter, and help teach these children English so they can have a better life ahead of them.
World statistics tell us that more than 72,000 children die every day because of hunger-related causes. For those who cannot fully sponsor a child, any amount, no matter how small, is welcome for the ministry we call Daily Bread. It works through local churches to provide food in bulk to needy children who are not yet sponsored by the Touch of Life program. To find out more, visit finalfrontiers.world.
All right, this is Joshua Martin, and I'm here today with Keith Penny. He's a missionary there in Honduras and working with the Touch of Life program. He's one of the main men there, along with the nationals that are there. And so, Keith, we're really glad to have you here today. We want to talk just a little bit about what you're doing in Honduras. What actually, in the first place, drew you to Final Frontiers? Can you talk about that?
Yes. Actually, my first trip to Honduras was on a diving trip about 26 years ago. That was to the island of Roatan.
Oh, wow.
After I completed that trip, there was no thought in my mind that I would necessarily return to Honduras, but God had other plans. And it was about 6 years ago that God put a call on my life to become a missionary. I had never once in my life thought about being a missionary. And so it was obviously something that, in a sense, was very surprising to me to receive the call. But the wonderful thing about it is that God gave me a peace about it. And having that peace about it gave me the assurance that this was not just something I had come up with, it was something from God, and that it was something I should follow, even though He did not give me all the details up front. And so not long after that was when Brother John Nelms visited my church as part of our missions week. And I had never met John before. And so he preached, I believe it was 3 nights. After the first night, I really liked what I heard. I liked what he spoke about. And I liked the way he projected himself, too. There was something about him personally that I think I was drawn to. After that first service, I introduced myself. And I knew that he probably, in his travels, had a lot of people come up to him after services and, I've been called to be a missionary. And I pretty much prefaced my comments with that. I said, I'm sure you've heard this before, but I just wanted to share with you that, in fact, God has put a calling on my life. And I would just like to try to stay in touch with you. Maybe there is a possibility with your ministry. It was probably 6-7 months after that when I took a visionary trip.
Okay.
So.
And you got to see Honduras for the first time?
Yes.
The second time, actually, I guess.
Yes, second time, but in a different light. The first visit was for myself. The next time down was for God's pleasure. And it was actually during that week that the Lord opened up the door of opportunity for me to be a part of Final Frontiers and Touch of Life.
To come back and work in that facility?
Yes.
So I remember the first time I met you was back in 2014, and I had just come off of a jungle trip in Peru. That's when we met for the first time. I was like skin and bones coming out of there because we had just survived that whole ordeal. And I remember meeting you, and you had been in Honduras for 3 months by that time, and you were supporting several children, I think, too, through the Touch of Life program. How many kids do you support personally?
I have 4.
Oh, wow.
Yes. As a matter of fact, when John came to our church, that's when I took on the first child as as a sponsor.
Okay.
And 3 more followed after that.
I remember personally going with you to like a soccer game of one of the boys that you supported. I think there was a kid there and you went, and I mean that's a special thing for you to be able to do that when even their own parents can't do things like that sometimes. A girl I remember you sponsoring when I was there, and she did not have parents or there was some issue, but there's a lot of sad issues in Honduras. When I was there I saw a lot of poor areas, so I'm sure that you've seen a lot now living there so long.
Yeah, that's the thing about, as opposed to going down, say, for a week, which is really a great thing. These visionary trips are wonderful because it gives you an opportunity to get out of your comfort zone, which I think all Christians ought to be ready to get out of their comfort zone. And you go and experience a different culture and see for yourself. It's one thing to hear somebody tell a story. Go see it for yourself. Get away. Get into that culture. Get into that environment, at least even if just for a week. But for me, I've been down there for 3.5 years.
Okay.
And so I have a greater understanding of what the problems are there, the challenges. For me personally, to be learning a new language late in life has been a great challenge for me, and I'm still in the process of learning Spanish. But I do receive encouraging comments along the way from people down there. Oh, your Spanish is so much better, and that's really good for me to hear that because it's something I'm still in the process of learning, but making progress. So that's a good thing.
What is some of the things that you do there at that facility there?
Well, first of all, the ministry is primarily focused on the sponsorship of children, where we feed them, we get them school uniforms and school supplies. We do help them with some basic medical care at times, and also the sponsorship of national pastors. Now, I sensed that God gave me an understanding before I went down there that I was going to do something more than just that. So I am involved with that and helping out and handling different responsibilities pertaining to the ministry as it's established now. But for me personally, God has opened up a number of doors of ministry, really focused in on the teenagers. I myself, back in my late teenage years, started using drugs. That was back in the early 70s. Eventually, alcohol became a problem for me. But through the grace of God, moved beyond all of that. And so understanding that God is the Redeemer of time.
Right.
He is that which was a problem for me, and now is in a sense, a strength for me. And I share my testimony with young people and try to warn them not to go down that same path because it is very destructive.
Can you think of any special stories with working with teenagers that you've seen? You've seen some things happen in the past few years.
One thing I would like to share real quickly is as I was given the opportunity to speak at a high school. And when my time came to get up and speak, there had been some other people to precede me. I noticed that the students were very distracted. They weren't paying attention. And I asked God, I said, what can I do to get their attention so that they will focus in on me and the message I have to share about the Lord?
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit just told me, there are a number of students here that are of the age when you yourself started using drugs, and that was at the age of 17. And so when it was my time to get up and speak, I just asked all of those that were in attendance that were 17 years old to please stand up. And a number of them did, and at that point is when I said, when I was your age, when I was 17, that's when I began to use drugs. And it got real quiet. So what the Lord had given me worked, and I had their attention at that point, and then I was able to share the gospel message with them and give them words of encouragement to be careful. It's really sad situation down there because not too long prior to my visit to that school, a couple of the young male students had been murdered by gang members because they refused to join the gang. So it was, for me personally, it was a very emotional time knowing that when I went into the school that had happened recently. And so it really, really focused me in on what their dilemma is.
Yeah.
And it is a prevalent problem in Honduras, is the problem with gangs.
Now, I've heard that you've been doing a lot of commuting. You've been helping people with medical issues to get all the way into Tegucigalpa. You've been doing a lot of that. You've been used for that as well. You're getting to meet a lot of interesting people.
Yes, in a sense, I've become an ambulance driver.
Wow.
Yeah. It's, again, this is not America. This is third world Honduras.
Right.
And it's a very poor country. They do not have the support system down there that we are familiar with up here. Mm-hmm. And so it's very difficult, especially this one lady in particular who has multiple health issues, including cancer. At times she can barely walk, so for her to get on a bus and take that hour-plus drive into the capital city is almost impossible for her. And so in a sense, within my community in Contaranas, I've been designated the go-to guy for help with medical transportation, medicine, food, and sometimes clothing. There's a number of stories I could share with you. We probably don't have time to do that, but it's just amazing the doors of opportunity the Lord has opened up for me to do the very thing that we all should be doing as Christians, which is sharing the love of Christ.
Right.
And the hope of the gospel message.
That's beautiful.
Amen.
That you can testify that all those opportunities are coming up.
Yep.
Well, it's been good to have you here today.
It's a blessing for me to be here. It really is. And to be a part of Final Frontiers and Touch of Life.
Have you ever wished you could help broken-hearted widows and orphans suffering in the third world countries? What about being an encouragement to persecuted Christian families in the Middle East? With our Bags of Hope food distribution program, you can make an impact on the saved and the lost by helping supply food, clean water, vitamins, and medicine, literally helping distribute real physical bags of hope to needy families. To learn more, visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
Your inquiries and comments are important to us. If you have questions or perhaps subject matter you would like to have addressed on this show, please visit us at finalfrontiers.world.
I was always taught that missionaries go to a single foreign field and stay there forever. I've heard of missionaries who lost their support because they moved from one country to another. Some feel that a missionary who moves from one place to another demonstrates he does not know God's will, yet many pastors move from church to church. The book of Acts reveals that Paul didn't go to just one place, he went to many. He was in Thessalonica for just 3 weeks. In Corinth, his longest stay in any one place hosted him for only a few years. It's not how long you stay that makes you a missionary. There are at least 3 biblical criteria that make that determination: where you go, what you do, and why you leave. It all comes down to one simple question: what is the difference between being a missionary and a traveling preacher or pastor? And here's the answer. Missions is the intentional relocating of your ministry from the regions that are informed about the gospel to another region that is uninformed. It is about exposing the unexposed to the gospel. Pastoring is about maturing the converts. Paul once announced that he was moving from Corinth to Spain because where he and his disciples had been serving, the regions of Galatia and Achaia, there was no place left for him to preach. Obviously, there were towns and churches eager and honored to host Paul. What he meant was that since he was not a pastor but a missionary, ordained by God to take the gospel to those regions with no exposure to it, he now had no choice but to move on in order to find another uninformed, unevangelized region and start again. Thus, he was moving to Spain. Biblically, pastors move into an established area to feed the sheep, while missionaries move on and plant new churches. I'm John Nelms. To learn more about world missions, order a copy of my book, The Great Omission, at our website, finalfrontiers.world.
This is Daniel Nelms.
And this is Michael Horn, and we're introducing to you the PowerPack Nano, or where it came about.
Well, oddly enough, I came up with the idea in the shower. We had a lot of preachers wanting to deploy our PowerPacks, and while they're awesome tools, they're also very expensive. So we needed something that was even smaller than our PowerPacks that could be used on an individual basis. And we had talked about possibly using small MP3 players and video players in the past, but those were kind of expensive until recently. So I had thought, hey, well, maybe we could get these things built for us in China. And after doing some research, I found out that that was actually going to be a real possibility.
And just a side note, the PowerPack is our evangelism tool for getting the word out to people in remote areas where you can't usually take your own projector, your own diesel generator.
We work with a lot of different ministries, and we partner with some people who are just amazing. That would be the Jesus Film Project, as well as Faith Comes by Hearing. Everybody knows what the Jesus Film is, but Faith Comes by Hearing, they're an outfit out in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they produce audio Bibles. Not just audio Bibles, but a dramatic recording of these Bibles. And through our partnership with them, we're able to put both the Jesus Film and Bibles in an audio format on these small devices. And these are so great because a vast majority of this world is still illiterate. They never had the opportunity to learn how to read. So you can give someone a tract, you can give someone a copy of the Bible or Gospels of John and Romans, but they can't read it. So it does them absolutely no good. But these devices are small, they're lightweight, and they're relatively inexpensive.
Yes, everybody can hear and understand, but not everybody can read. And that's what we take for granted here in the United States is people can read. So that's why tracts are such a benefit here and in the first world. But in the third world, literacy rates are very low. And so we have to hit them with a whole different method to get the message into their ears.
So far, we've deployed, probably close to 600 of these devices, maybe more. One of our board members, after pitching this idea to them at our last board meeting, paid to have 500 of these things built. So we did our first run and had them shipped to India, and they were all in the Tamil language. And those are being given out right now by our national church planners there in India.
Giving them out first gives that contact between the local national pastor and the individuals. It's something they've never seen, this little small portable thing. They may have mobile phones now, but this is certainly something they're not used to seeing. So it's going to get their interest. And they've got a face to go with it. It's going to hopefully pull them into the church there and make them part of the congregation and ultimately bring about their salvation.
Yeah, these are great evangelistic tools. They're great tools for discipleship. I even gave one of these to my mother-in-law. She's almost 80 years old. She's from Honduras. There was not even a school in her town when she was a girl, so she never learned how to read. But she's a great Christian. She loves the Lord. She carries her Bible around with her even though she can't read it. So while she was here a few months ago with us, we actually gave her one of these devices, and she listened to it practically nonstop. Took it home with her and still does. These are wonderful, wonderful tools. These tools are distributed under our PowerPack program, which is run by AMT. That's a subsidiary of our ministry, Final Frontiers. It's not just missionaries and preachers who can share the gospel. You can do it too. Even you fellow geeks out there. Use the tools and the brain that God gave you and spread the word.
From the creators of the PowerPack at AMT comes the new edition, the PowerPack Nano. Imagine a small device that can be activated by the touch of a button, a device preloaded not only with an audio Bible in a targeted language, but also with a gospel film and a personal invitation to receive Christ given in their own ethnic dialect, making God's word available for all people, even those who cannot read. To be a part of this historic opportunity, visit us at finalfrontiers.world. You've been listening to the Final Frontiers radio show, funded by sponsors like you. Thank you so much for joining us. Through the funding of national and native preachers, we endeavor to effectively advance the gospel where it has never been preached before. If you want more information, visit www.finalfrontiers.world. That's finalfrontiers.world.